Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Ex-FBI agent Charles McGonigal, who retired back in 2018, is about to become one of the highest-ranking FBI agents to ever be convicted of a crime. But it's not just any old crime facing the 55-year-old. It's the fact that he's charged with violating U.S. sanctions by working with a Russian oligarch. So here perhaps is yet another example of the feds, along with the Democrats and the Clinton campaign more specifically, but at this point I'm just repeating myself since they're also intertwined, who were actually guilty of what they were accusing President Trump of falsely back in 2016. Now, that's not to say that Russia is undermining our elections in any significant way. I mean, how could they with the way our national security state is taking up so much real estate in that market? But still, it's just worth pointing out the Saul Alinsky-style tactic of accusing your political enemy of what you yourself are guilty of to divert the blame for it. So in this case, McGonigal was the head of counterintelligence for the FBI's New York field office. He was the one who got the initial email about Trump campaign aide George Papadopoulos being set up by that shady alleged spook plant Joseph Mifsud, the British/Maltese academic who came to Papadopoulos about possible Russian dirt on the Clintons, which he brushed off because of how bizarre that encounter was. But somehow the national security state recorded that meeting as if Papadopoulos was bragging about Russian dirt on the Clintons. And so when McGonigal forwarded that email, it helped to birth the opening of Operation Crossfire Hurricane. After initially pleading not guilty to accusations that he was being paid for outside work with powerful foreign nationals like Deripaska, which conflicted with his law enforcement work and was not reported, McGonigal is now reported to be taking a plea deal sometime soon. Joining us now to discuss all this and more is U.S. and international government policy analyst Armen Kurdian. Armen, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Kara.
Great. So this seems to be a recurring pattern, at least in my mind, doesn't it? That those involved with the Russia hoax for so many years end up being the actual guilty parties, at least when it comes to collusion, quote unquote, with Russia, not Trump.
I know. It's truly tragic and sad. The FBI is really, our premier law enforcement organization, and it's just getting another black eye here. And the biggest issue is that the American public are really starting to lose faith with this national law enforcement organization, which we expect to protect us. McGonigal fell victim to one of the oldest crimes, and that is ego. His ego when he got in, that I can do this, I can get away with it, I'm bigger than my britches, I'm more important, and all this other stuff that's happening to the Republicans, it's not going to affect me. And here he is doing the exact same thing that a lot of the folks in the administration were accusing him of. And if you want to go back to, sadly, this is not the first time this kind of thing happens with Hansen. About 20 years ago when he was arrested because of his ego and ideological connections with Russia and selling secrets. It's a big challenge for the U.S. to monitor these kinds of things and stop them before they become very damaging, whether it's reputation or classified intelligence.
And with this one, at least according to the New York Times, they say McGonigal, it seems, was more animated by money, wanting to make money, any more so than, say, a political motive. Though I guess at this point we can't exactly always discount that, but it's interesting just kind of reading through it. They talk about some oligarchs in Albania, and then of course the Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska and the rest. It kind of reads like what we're seeing with Hunter Biden, right? The buying and selling of influence, making money on the side, not reporting things. Of course, the Hunter Biden situation is far more grievous for what it perhaps symbolizes for peddling out American influence and prosperity ever since Joe Biden at least was in the vice president slot, and now of course sitting as the resident of the Oval Office. But is it concerning to you that many of our intel agents that, perhaps, I'm not going to put an exact figure on it, but it seems that there are plenty who are on the take from all sorts of foreign nationals, and that can really affect our national security at home would be the main issue, would you say?
Oh, American intelligence, the information that we have, whether it's industrial secrets, our national security, our operations plans, that's gold for a lot of our enemies out there, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and they will stop at nothing to get this kind of information. And this thing with McGonigal, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Think about it. So maybe if this wasn't caught and he builds this relationship, then he starts talking to his buddies, say, hey, I'm talking to the former head of counterintelligence of the New York FBI office. Maybe he might be able to help you out with something else. Do you see? It's just one thing can lead to another, and you just never know where these things kind of go. And then all of a sudden, he finds himself trapped, and then he's either got to fess up or come clean, or he just keeps doing what he's doing so he can protect his own skin. So we always have to be in great care because, like, for example, I was a 25-year veteran in the U.S. Navy, and they taught us a lot about counterintelligence, protecting America's secrets. It's a very vital and important part of the job that we do. And when we see someone betray that trust, it really hurts us all to the core.
That it does. And speaking of the Navy, I believe it was 2 U.S. service members of Chinese Americans who are now being accused of, once again, of espionage and selling out some secrets to China. I think, one of the young men, I think it was his own mother who was telling him to take the deal and to work with China, or at least some agents of China, because it could help him in the future with his career if he did want to work with China, like I said, in the future. But is that kind of similar to what we're seeing here, and kind of goes back to our main theme that this is quite common?
When you find situations like, say, it's someone has a lot of debt, or they get caught in a honey trap, they're having an adulterous affair, or something sinister, some of those factors sometimes can be easy to find. When it's more ideologically driven, then that becomes a lot more challenging and difficult to root out. Look at China, hundreds of efforts over the last 20 years to try to approach with their government personnel, their military personnel, approaching individuals within the United States, whether in the military or in corporate world or within the government, to try to steal our secrets. They can build a frontline fighter in 7 years where it takes us 14 because they're stealing all of our information. So it is a constant attack that we're undergoing. And a lot of our young sailors are just not prepared for it, no matter how much you train them. It's very challenging, and you have to really stay engaged with them to understand what's actually happening.
I think so as well, because like you're saying, it's one thing to be trained on this, on what to look for, but then when you go and you're talking to all sorts of people who, they know you're in the military, so they may sidle up to you and start talking to you and, act like they have some information, and they make it seem so easy and it's so secure and, just follow me. And so a lot of young people can sometimes kind of be lured away by that. I mean, it is a scary world, like you said. There are a lot of nations who have a vested interest in undermining us and, taking our money, our hegemon, position of power on the world stage. There's talk about a new axis that unfortunately that is rising because of some of our foreign policy blunders, but many of them seem to be quite intentional. So I don't know if you can exactly call them blunders, but here we're talking about Russian oligarchs, and we're seeing with the proxy war in Ukraine, also talking China, but there's another big player here. We're seeing Iran. They're making some noise in the Red Sea. Biden deploying more troops out to the Red Sea because of it. Iran's harassing merchant vessels. They've been doing that for a while, but they're getting more aggressive with it. We see there's a prisoner swap, and that, still a lot of negotiations back and forth with the Biden administration on that one, but it seems the Biden administration is willing to unfreeze up to $6 billion in assets once frozen by the Trump administration. But then many people worry, is Iran going to take that money and run? The Biden administration, they say, no, don't worry, there's brakes on it. It can only be for humanitarian aid, food, medicine, things of that nature. But Iran says, hey, it's our money. If we want to use it for our purposes, i.e., terrorism, the number one state sponsor of terrorism, they say it's theirs to do with it. Do you think the Biden administration might be about to get snowed on that as well?
Well, once again, we're seeing this country's failure to negotiate with Joe Biden in the White House in whatever capacity that happens to be. So the fact that we have prisoner exchanges now and then, that's not uncommon. But giving $6 billion away, let's say, for example, that all of these controls placed on this money actually stay in place, that it is only used for humanitarian aid. It means that Iran can take $6 billion of their internal sovereign wealth and they can spend it for something else that they wouldn't have otherwise done. Their nuclear program is enriching uranium up to 60%. You only need a maximum of 20% if you actually had peaceful intentions. So there's no question that they're actually pursuing a nuclear weapon. Trump got out of the Iran deal because it was a bad deal. Iran was adhering to the requirements of that agreement, but it was such a worthless agreement that it really didn't mean anything. And here we are 8 years later, they would be on their path to getting a nuclear weapon anyway. So with what's happening there, with what's happening with their seizing ships in the Gulf, remember 40 years ago when they were mining ships in the Gulf and Reagan stood up to Iran, Operation Praying Mantis, seizing that ship that was laying mines. Negotiation through strength with a country like Iran is the direction that we actually need to go. Negotiation through weakness just invites additional events like this to happen, where we continue to negotiate away any kind of advantage that we possibly have for what little perceived political gain that the White House might have, even though that perception is incredibly incorrect.
You know, and like you said, it always seems to come around and bite us in the rear end. They always say, no, no, don't worry, it's going to work this time. How many times have we heard that? We hear that with communism all the time. No, no, real communism's never been tried. This time it's going to be the right way. And of course, every time it crashes and burns. So same thing with our poor attempts at diplomacy. But I guess with everything else we're talking about, just because a lot of people are getting paid to make certain deals that you and I go, this doesn't make sense. But for someone being paid for, being lobbied for, it makes sense for them. It just hurts the rest of us. But Armin, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.